industrial session, the second industrial session of today. And the title of this session is a blockchain for trustworthiness of data society. So we have panelists from 3 event sponsors, Data Garage, NRI, and Final M. And the panelists are the Joito from Data Garage, so he will join shortly. And Ken Katayama from NRI here. And Kosuke Kawazu from NRI. And Masafumi Asakura from Final M. And so this is the industrial panel, but so the panel would like to discuss about so blockchain, how blockchain ecosystem could help to improve that trustworthiness of data society, because that's a country that so generative AI could be an additional headache for that our trustworthiness of the data over our data ecosystem. And we would like to start with that presentations from each panelist. At first, I would like to ask NRI, Katayama-san and Kawazu-san to give a presentation.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. My name is Ken Katayama. I myself has already exposed to some of the sessions on the day 1, 2, 3. But as it was as an individual or professional, as many of you, and since this is an industrial session, we'd like to introduce some of my colleagues at NRI. That means the more the commitment on as a corporate to the theme of today's discussion. And could you and Kawazu is one of the colleague. He will explain it much detail in later. On the next page, please. So let me briefly, perhaps on 3 pages, introduce you what is an NRI. NRI stands for the Nomura Research Institute, which has a Nomura name in it. So it was a spin-off from the Nomura Securities back in almost 58 years ago. 2 divisions. One is a research division, can write reports and the conferences, and the other is a computer system division of the Nomura. And those companies merged in 1988. And after 1 year after that, I joined this company, so the new NRI. And in 2001, it was kind of listed in the Tokyo Stock Exchange. That means institutional investor holds us. So it's an independent company. No more, not only the Nomura, but many of the public owns the company. And next, please. And the many of my kind of exposure as a researcher to provide the kind of the views of the industry to help the regulators and the policymakers and also the industry participants to understand what's going on in the market and what's the direction in Japan and in the world. But as a service provider of the we provided consultancy and the financial IT solutions and the industrial IT solutions. And also actually we have 4 data centers. So infrastructure level, the actual machines, we provided services to the clients. And the next page, please. And perhaps about one of the frequent keyword that I spoke in this BGIN conference is the bridge. So on the day 1, 2, 3, we spoke about the bridge between the DeFi community and the TradFi community. But not only that, there's many lake and silos and places that needs to bridge, even within the company or within the industry. And one aspect is that on the left-hand side, this is the composition of the NRI's business itself. So on the pale green section is the financial services, like a broker-dealer or securities companies, banks, asset management companies, and insurance companies. And on the left-hand side, the blue portion of the industrials or manufacturers and the distributor. Distributor means a kind of retail outlet, like a supermarket or convenience stores. And traditionally, those divisions are more of the kind of independent, not talking to each other directly because the client base is different. But in the advent of this blockchain things, we need to have more occasion to communicate between not only amongst the financial services supporting divisions, but also the some other divisions. And that's why my colleague who is doing businesses in the communication services, supporting telcos, is coming today. He's not from the financial service side, but on the left-hand side. And in that addition, NRA was a very domestic company. On the right-hand side, the dark blue portion is the domestic services businesses. In terms of this case, a number of employees. But today, as you see, on the top side is the number of overseas employees in overseas, inclusive the direct subsidiary or direct offices of the NRI, and also those companies which we invested or acquired in the various countries, including Australia. So that's the kind of quick overview of the NRI. And let me pass to my colleague who's coming from the communication services supporting. Next page, please. Yep. So Kawazu-san, floor is yours. You may be on mute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Katayama-san. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Kosuke Kawazu. I wish I could have been to the Sydney, but due to time constraint, I could not make it. So I'm presenting online. Next page, please. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Kosuke Kawazu. I work for NRI Nomura Research Institute. And I'm responsible for a product called Vortec, which I will introduce today. I graduated from Keio University, Graduate School of System Design and Management in 2010, after which I joined Nomura Research Institute. Since joining the company, I have development systems and manage projects for a variety of industry, including communication and retail area. I have been involved in the development of ID management systems, including authentication and authorization, such as OpenID Connect and FIDE, and payment systems, such as carrier payment and credit card payment. When considering the future in this field, I came decentralized ledger technology, and from there, we acquired technology in the Web3 area, such as DIDVC and NFT, and currency, encrypted currency. In consulting and system development in the Web3 area. So specialties, identity and access management, and payment and Web3. Next slide, please. Now, let's get down to business. Various companies provide a variety of Web3 digital wallets we recognize that there were two major issues with many of the digital wallets provided today. The first is the management of private keys. There are two methods of managing using private keys. One is managed by the user, a non-custodial wallet, and the other, the wallet provider, is custodial wallet. In Japan, wallet providers cannot manage a user's private key without a license, as cryptocurrency exchange service providers with Financial Service Agency. It's FSA. So it is not easy for wallet providers to get a license and encrypted currency exchange service providers. Therefore, many wallet providers will want to provide wallets as non-custodial wallets. However, non-custodial wallets require users to manage their private keys, exposing them to the risk of loss or overflow. And second, there are too many wallets. Wallets are now provided for each purpose. For example, a famous wallet for managing cryptocurrency and NFT, such as MetaMask. However, such wallets cannot verify identity. On the other side, wallets like European Digital Wallet, a digital identity wallet, can verify identity, but cannot manage NFT and cryptocurrency. As a result, users have to download and use many apps. Next slide, please. So this is Vortec, and Vortec was created to resolve these issues. Vortec is a product of NRI and is a development kit for Web3 digital wallet. Vortec has 5 assets now. These are self-solving identity asset and NFT managed asset and payment asset and cryptocurrency management asset and the user private key backup asset. We think these assets are the basic functions needed for Web3 digital wallets, and Vortec makes it easy for wallet providers to build wallets. Vortec also provides us a function to connect to Web3 service, such as Wallet Connect, so that the wallet you build can be used to with Web3 service such as Metaverse or the NFT market or the identity verification. Next slide, please. The Vortec has 3 distinct features. The first, the easy construction of Web3 digital wallets, while allowing the freedom to build the UX that is so important, is building wallets. With the wallets provided by white label, you can customize, but you are often restricted and unable to create the UX from the scratch as you wish. With Vortec, it is possible to build wallets that meet the requirements of the wallet provider's environment, although it must be integrated into the system. The second is secure management of private keys. Wallet providers users private keys backup service, which use a technique called secret sharing to backup their private keys. Secret sharing is a kind of encryption technique. Secret sharing differs from mere discretion in it divides the data into non-sensitive pieces of description. And when all the pieces or some number of them gathered, the original data can be recovered. By considering this technology and service specs, it is possible to build non-custodial wallets with low risk of leakage in case of a loss of users' private keys. Third, it is possible to create all-in-one wallets that can both provide identity verification and manage NFT and cryptocurrency. Wallet provides wallet providers with as much functionality as they need. If a wallet provider wants to build a wallet to manage NFTs, cryptocurrencies, they can use only the assets they need in Wallet. Yes, next slide, please. A brief introduction to the adaptive technologies at Vortex. First, DID and VC are discussed in various organizations, but Vortex has adapted the content of the WSNC and the OpenID Foundation. Especially, we have adapted the WSNC content for the DID VC data model, and OpenID Foundation content for data coordination. Vortex support protocols used and EVM-based blockchains such as EOC and EIP for NFT and cryptocurrency. Blockchains with proven connectivity, including Ethereum, Polygon, Oasis, and so on. Wallet also supports technology such as Wallet Connect, which allows Wallet to connect to Web3 services. Next slide, please. Wallet plans not only to follow various protocols, but also to enrich the functions necessary to realize the service. The concept of Wallet is to allow users to use wallets in a safe and secure manner. We plan to provide several value features in the future. For example, in the ID area of ID, we plan to provide the functions necessary for an asset that allows data to be used for the benefit of individual files securely managing personal information, and for an asset that allows the related parties to collaborate on data within the trust framework. In the area of NFT, we also plan to provide an asset to protect creators. We hope that this will help to solve the issue of royalty to creators on resale, which has been discussed in various situations, and to protect creators' privacy and rights at the same time. Next slide, please. The final slide. We believe that the number of users of Web3 services is limited at the moment, but that a world in which many users will use Web3 services on a daily basis will come in the future. We hope that Vortex can be of some help to the future. So we believe it is necessary to have discussions with various people. If you're interested in using Vortex as well as exchanging information, please contact the Vortex team made to this address. Yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to switch to the next presentation from Final Aim.
Okay.
Masafumi Asakura will give a presentation.
Okay. Can I see my slide?
Yes, I can hear you and I see your slides.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Masa, co-founder and CEO of Final Aim. I'm a serial entrepreneur, first exit in Singapore and second in Tokyo in Japan. And the previous startup was additive manufacturing and artificial intelligence startup. And 2019, I launched Final Aim with co-founder. And Final Aim makes frictionless post-signature contract management and executions for design and manufacturing industries, especially enterprise side. So clients are Sony, Panasonic, as an Nikon, those type of companies, especially as a design department. And problem is contract management and executions. Contract management and execution is costly, risky, and human intensive, especially design and manufacturing. For example, how to manage intellectual properties is very tough. And in the case of, for example, once a design department asks the design firm about design, and the design firm asks another freelance designer, and another freelance designer asks another freelance designer. Sometimes no contract, sometimes only just a verbal communication. So in the viewpoint of the traceability and the transparency, this is very tough. And in the case of the payment, it's very complex. The reason why sometimes it's a design fee is a licensing fee. One product times 3 to 4% as the licensing fee. And as an industry circumstance, designer have to calculate those type of licensing fee. It's very complicated. That's the reason why that's a problem. And a very famous problem, especially in the viewpoint of the design right, is Samsung and the Apple as smartphones are the designer's problem. Design right problem is very famous. Even lawyer fee, it's around 60 million cost will be happen. It's a serious as a costly problem. And recently, the influence of the generative AI is a lot of the impact for designers. The reason why, in the case of when designer use the generative AI tool, Stable Definition or the Mid Journey, Day4, so type of tool, in the viewpoint of copyright, it is very tough to sustain. It's of course it's complicated and it depends on the country. That's a serious problem. So our solution is a post-signature contract management and the execution platform by smart contract. We have already launched a platform and it's possible to manage 2D and 3D data and the design contract and the intellectual property. Almost all the transaction and the history was recorded by the blockchain. And our value proposition is authenticity, the contract, design data, and the intellectual properties ownership. And everything is recorded by blockchain. As our client is once again Sony and Panasonic and the Autodesk, those type of companies. Our headquarters is Delaware Corp, USA side, and subsidiary is Tokyo in Japan. And once again, as founders, I'm Masa, co-founder, the CEO of Final Aim, and additional co-founder, Yas, is Nikon's professional industrial designers. And the previous startup, artificial intelligence and additive manufacturing startup, we work together. So recently, 7 years experience both sides. And advisors, UC Barclays as a Barclays Skydex as a several advisor, and ex-Adobe's person. And currently, our angel investor is Tom Moss, the serial entrepreneur, current as Asia Pacific CEO of Skydeal, and ex-Adobe's was North Europe and Asia Pacific's managing director, Craig Tiger, and James Pranton was his lawyer over the 25th experience in USA side. About achievement, in this year, we are selected as Innovation Showcase by Stanford University, and most likely to become the next Unicorn Award as a by UC Berkeley's accelerator, Berkeley Skydex. UC Berkeley is in the viewpoint of the blockchain technologies, the very good track record. Yeah, that's a final casual introduction. Thank you for hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. The next is Joito, so you know well. And Joy, so could you start your talk on that recent your works and the situation regarding the blockchain and the Web3 and AI?
Yeah. So I thought what would be the most useful would be to do a little update on AI stuff and how it ties to blockchain. And there's been obviously a lot of news over the weekend, but I spent the last couple of weeks in Silicon Valley talking to and coordinating with think tanks and government and the heads of most of the foundation model companies. So I'll focus a little bit on AI, and then we can see how it integrates later in the conversation. But just as a recap, I think everybody knows there are several, not very many, what we're calling sort of frontier AI models, so OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Alphabet, and Inflection. And there are a number of open source models like the Llama 2 from Meta and 7B from Mistral and others. And I think the consensus, so I'll give you kind of what is not necessarily my view, but what I think is the consensus of what I would call maybe the major players in Silicon Valley. And I think the consensus is that open source is roughly 18 months behind the closed source. So that within 6 months or so, we'll see an open source GPT-4 and so on. And then there are obviously some risks that people have and concerned about with open source models. There are, Microsoft just released open source as well. So I think there are efforts to try to guardrail open source, but I don't know that we have figured out exactly how to do it. And even with some guardrails, I think people are concerned that open source has some risks. And I think this was kind of interesting, the consensus of the room, and I'm more skeptical, but I think the consensus of the room was that we would have models that are 1,000 times to 10,000 times as more powerful than what we have now in the next 10 years. So 10 times more money, 10 times faster hardware, and 10 times to 100 times better algorithms. And I think there is a kind of leap of faith that more powerful means better and smarter. But there's definitely a race condition to try to get that. There's a lot of conversation about AGI. And I think the rough definition for AGI is better than humans on all cognitive tasks. And then some of the things that people were concerned about and wanted to safeguard were when we start to see recursive self-improvement, especially if the self-improvement showed that the machines were getting better at programming AI than humans. And then autonomy, the ability to copy themselves. And I think one of the things they were concerned about is with autonomy, you might get deception. So that even if we have checks and guardrails, those guardrails will be, or the tripwires might be avoided by AI. And the fear that people seem to have in these larger models was this kind of intelligence explosion. So if you have recursive self-improvement and autonomy, you can end up having a machine that reprograms itself to be smarter and smarter and smarter, so that whoever is in the first place, you end up with a system that just becomes sort of not infinitely smart, but extremely smart, that we can no longer control. And if that machine is a deceptive machine, then it becomes dangerous. So that was a fear that more people expressed than I would have imagined. It's sort of science fiction-y, but I think that was a real concern for some people. In general, the concerns seem to be around the biggest concerns, the medium-term biggest concerns were around biosecurity and cybersecurity risks. So using AI to come up with 0 days, or using AI to help terrorists design biological weapons. I think the consensus was that the current models with the current guardrails don't help you that much in either of these tasks, but that if GPT-4 came out as open source and guardrails were taken off, that you could train it on specific data sets that might help people trying to cause these problems, and that eventually they would become problems. One important thing was that, currently AI agents aren't in the way that current AI agents are, that we could use traditional liability laws to manage a lot of the risks and the incentives around the risks, and we could treat the manufacturers and the users of these agents as responsible, the way we would do normal technology. But if we get recursive self-improvement and self-goal setting, the machine may be able to get out of the current liability regimes and make it not really feasible to identify the developer or the user. And I think, again, rough consensus of the room that I got was 2 to 3 years. I wish I could tell you who said what, but it was Chatham House rules, so I can only give you kind of a rough idea. But I think, again, for a fair number of people, open source without guardrails presented issues. And if you've been tracking the conversation around the EU AI Act, they're trying to add LLMs into it since the act was begun before. And Germany and France, who both have interests in open source AI models, is trying to sort of hold that back. So there's kind of an issue around the open source governance piece right now. But just, and this is the information here is very fresh, mainly because there was the AI UK AI Summit, as many of you know, and the UK launched the AI Safety Institute, which is well funded and seems to be working quite well. And the US wasn't able to get their act together, but they made this executive order, I think, mainly to be in time for the UK summit. And I think the executive order is probably the most the US can do given the time constraints. And it has a lot of very specific reporting requirements, which is interesting. And the US under NIST has set up the US AI Safety Institute, which isn't funded yet and needs to get developed. But and in Japan, I think we're starting to have conversation around it. I think what's important to realize, the US and the UK safety institutes have some connectivity to defense and cybersecurity, whereas in Japan, I don't know that we have a person who looks at both cybersecurity and AI, or defense and AI. So that's something we would need to develop. And then I'll just pivot a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of this conversation is around LLMs and neural networks that are fundamentally difficult to understand, and you're sort of growing it, and they're not safe in many ways. And there are probabilistic programs which were more popular in AI in the 90s. And we're still working on probabilistic programs, and we're starting to see probabilistic programs being deployed to constrain or to control or to scaffold neural networks. And so I think the things that I shared today were mainly the consensus of people who are working primarily on deep learning and LLMs. But I think there's another architecture for how AI will work. And I think that could be more probabilistic programs with symbolic AI that could be more explainable and more structured. And I think it would be more responsible. And we're learning a lot about what we can do with AIs using deep learning, but I think that many of these things could be done with more structured machine learning. And so this is an area that I think is important to focus on, and for things like writing smart contracts, managing the blockchain, and doing things that require trust and safety. I think probabilistic programs are better than neural networks. And I think neural networks are going to be great for certain types of data and for language interfaces, but I think we need to pivot to symbolic Bayesian systems. And then I'll end a little bit on how I'm trying to connect blockchain and Web3 to AI. So if you go kind of historically, 7,000 years ago, we had clay tablets, and we created a ledger on them with Sumerian cuneiform in Mesopotamia, and we were able to centrally manage the resources of cities in Mesopotamia. And just being able to scale these cities to 10,000 people because we were able to coordinate the accounting was a key thing. And I think later, if you think about the base material of paper and ink, we had an accounting layer that developed, including things like double entry bookkeeping. And on top of double entry bookkeeping, we had, like statistics and probability and financial theory, and we were able to create what is probably modern capitalism as well as democracy. So you have you have the accounting layer and the management layer. So, and once we had double entry bookkeeping, it took, hundreds of years, 600 years, I guess 700 years ago, to develop all of the controls and the use of double entry bookkeeping to get the kind of sophisticated markets that we have today. And I think that if you think about the base materials shifting to digital, that blockchain and smart contracts are the accounting layer. This is how you track where things are, what relationships people have with what, but this is sort of at the atomic layer. And I think what we're doing now with AI is we're coming up with the programmatic layer. So to me, this is parallel to things like finance and probability theory. So what I think we need to do is we need to use machine learning and AI to understand all of the transparency that we're creating at the blockchain layer, to then write smart contracts and manage. And if you think about it, any company is just a bundle of contracts that are all executed and written by hand. But if we could change this bundle of contracts into something that is created by AI, is audited and controlled, then I think we end up with something that's much more sophisticated. And so I think that AI is the control layer of an accounting layer that's Web3. And then on top of that, we get a lot more interesting stuff with higher transparency, higher control, that's programmatic and scalable. But I think we need to do it in the service of regulatory framework that increases safety and trust. And I think it's going to take a while, just like it took a while for us to develop the regulatory system around corporations and public markets. But I think it's something that needs to be developed. But I think it's important to keep the layers somewhat separate. I mean, I think it's important. I think finance is interesting, but I think finance is built on top of an accounting layer. And I think that we still use primarily double entry bookkeeping style thinking at the accounting layer. And I don't think there's been enough innovation in thinking about blockchain and smart contracts as accounting technology, which is kind of where I put it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so we have about 20 minutes for the discussion Q&A. And I would like to start with that. So what Joy told about that, the problem might be caused by AI, and it's a liability problem. And so Joy also mentioned about that the functionality for accounting by blockchain. And my fundamental question to Joy is that blockchain features for the accounting could solve the problem of liability by AI.
Yeah, so I think there's different layers that we can use for. So I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to start to record provenance, record who users are. There's a lot of access control issues. And so, for instance, when we're talking about the risk of open source models, and one of the things that people are going to do is we're going to start tracking who's using energy, who's using data, who's training models. And there's a lot of reporting requirements that are going to go into governing AI. And I think that could be an access as well. So that I think could be a very important role for Web3. And then I think the other piece is auditing the blockchain. And I think that integrating AI auditing for Web3, but also using Web3 to manage the access control to both the data and the auditing systems. I think those are very important and things that we can be working on today.
So does the audit mean that audit of what in AI?
So I think I'm talking about audit very broadly, but I think that what we want is when we talk about an auditor going into a company, a lot of it is checking the provenance of the data, checking whether something in the supply chain has happened. Basically, everything in your ERP system, you want to be able to assert is true at the ground level, rather than paying an auditor to go in and interview everything and do everything by hand. And so when you're auditing a company, you're auditing the factual claims that are made. So for instance, if you submit your balance sheet and P&L to a stock market, every single number has a whole bunch of other numbers underneath it, and they all sort of get aggregated into the final numbers. And right now, all of that auditing is done by hand by an auditor. And I think a lot of those features could be clarified with crypto and blockchain.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask the question to Asakura-san, Final AM. And as far as I heard that your presentation, that your technology and your product handling the problem of that, that so it's something like that. So accounting or something like that for the contract and the rights management, some images, some design. So some part of the image or design might be created by generative AI. But so please explain a little bit more about that, how your product could help the trustworthiness of data in the era of generative AI or AI.
Okay, thank you. In the case of the viewpoint of the design, as influence of generative AI is a very big impact, especially point of is authenticity. Whether this design is made by human and whether this design is made by the generative AI. As the current technologies, it is very tough to distinguish both sides. So our final aims approaches is to connect with design data, with design contract, and intellectual property. Almost all the three combinations and recorded by blockchain. In this case, very easy to understand whether this is a human made or not. This is a generative AI or not. But in the case of the generative AI, there's the two aspects: the before of making the data and after the output. In the case of the output, okay, it's possible to declare or not. Okay, this is a human or the generative AI. But before the timing of the gathering the data and okay, this is used its copyright is invalid or not. It's very tough. So our solution is the after output, and in the case of the design, it's possible to sustain.
Okay, thank you. And so when I heard that Joy's thoughts on that combining AI platform and Web3 blockchain platform, but my fundamental question is so we need to have some cryptographic operation using private key or signing key everywhere. So when we use, so every location, the AI is, so we have some process by AI, it should be that, so the wallet everywhere. And so, that first presentation by NRI is regarding the wallet. And so most of wallet companies are considering that the wallet is used by human itself. But so when I think about that generative AI era, so we should consider the situation, the wallet everywhere. So some part of the wallets could be managed by non-human, something like that. And that's I think NRI's current wallet product is assume that so the management by human, but so what do you think about that future of the usage or use cases of wallet? It's a question to so in
Very interesting question. Perhaps why don't you answer first the assumption that current wallet technology SDK is aiming for and any possibilities in the future? You're on mute.
Sorry. そうですね。うん、
Perhaps while he's providing some answers, let me comment during. If the AI has the kind of word and the word is kind of can do some let's say transactions or gather transactions as gathering the information or learning the materials kind of publicly available, maybe but copyrighted. There's some trace that AI learn from those publicly available material. Then, if those materials are kind of let's say time-stamped, because if I'm Ken Katayama, already written some report and they published today, and a year after, some AI can come to me, come to that document and learn several kind of insights. And if the AI will publish some of the, let's say, insights by the query of anyone else, and it shows that, let's say, evidence that I learned from this material as a footnote of the answer, it's kind of the proof that AI is doing some good things, and also I was protected as an original author. But in this case, time stamping is very important because somebody else has me already kind of published that notion. But even though blockchain itself doesn't have any time stamping functionality, but I can include the date, year, day, month, and date at least. Not by the second, not necessary, on the date. I publish my kind of concept to public, and AI recognize it by the word, and also have trace on the blockchain. No one else can alter it. Then there was some proof, or even that may help that AI not infringing my copyright. But there's some let's say priority, because AI cannot do everything to everything. Copyrighted material is all over the place, so I may have to indicate those time. Yeah, this my material is to be timestamped. But those kind of the selection criteria, Kawai-san may have some insights or comments or maybe personal opinion on it.
Yeah, thank you, Katayama-san. It's important is creator's personal data. I mean if the personal data is overflow, so I mean this address on this person, and the person create the letter, and so this is the risk of risk of personal data overflow. It is danger over the creator. So I think protect creators and right, but then in the same the protect creators' privacy. Yeah.
The only thing it could be who bears the cost of the traceability, the gas in the Ethereum case, gas fees.
Okay. And so, Joy-san, so okay, but so one question from audience.
Thanks, it was great. Joichito, thank you very much. It was a great overview of AI. I just wanted to make a plug for the Australian National AI Centre that also has a responsible AI network. It's a government and industry partnership. in industry at the moment, I mainly see kind of AI being used for kind of cost reduction, operational cost reduction. But I'm kind of more interested in what the sort of fundamental transformations will happen in industry from AI. And it was an interesting observation you made about AI being a potential control layer for in relation to sort of better management and use of contracts in business. I was curious, you know, AI also kind of lets people copy things easily. So I'm kind of curious what that's going to mean for industry. Is it going to kind of undermine the ability for companies to be distinctive, to have kind of sustainable competitive differentiation? Do you see that as being a challenge, or do you see any other kinds of fundamental transformation, particularly in the finance sector?
Yeah, I think that the burst of energy right now is around these large language models, which will fundamentally suffer from hallucinations and unreliability. And so I think in the short term, you're always going to have some human oversight at the end. And so by definition, what it does is it significantly improves the productivity of professionals. I think the most improvement is happening with software coders, and then we'll see lawyers and all these other things. But I think that, and again, I think I'm the odd man out. I think that if you talk to the LLM people, they believe that their path is the path to superintelligence. I think that when we look at facts and data and structural things, I think that we need to work on symbolic probabilistic programs. So I think that there's a slightly different scaling path, but in the short run, I think a lot of these big LLM models, as you say, are a little bit boring in that, not boring, but they focus on lowering costs. Will be the first gains. I think that the translation piece is quite important, to be able to allow natural language to program things, to allow natural language translation across languages and things like that, I think is quite substantial. I do personally, and I think people have different areas where they think it's going to be important, but I think that what happens is that, and why I think the combination with Web3 is important, is if you just imagine a world where all of our preferences are being modeled constantly. So it knows that I care about sustainability and that I care about sustainability more than education, but education is number 2, and I won't work with these types of groups, and I'm very careful about labor. I could direct my pension money to never go into a company that goes against my values. And when I'm in the store, to always highlight to me any of the products that go against my values and which companies are for my values. And if you're a company and you're being audited and you have, right now we have SDGs and all kinds of numbers, but if a company could prove that their gender equality is at this level, given this formula, or that their actual, and right now, the carbon credit thing is full of fraud, and it keeps going up and down because the auditability of carbon is very poor. But if you could in fact show how your sustainability is in your company and express that, suddenly I think what would happen is that corporations' transparency and visibility, as well as the preferences of investors and customers, could fundamentally change the relationship between companies and the public. And we could imagine this same thing happening in politics. If I have an AI that tells me, here are my preferences, which politicians in fact actually care. What is the number in this year's Australian budget that's the most unusual given past history? What are the effects, and who are the politicians involved, and what have they been saying, and how does this match with my preferences? If you could ask those sorts of questions against bodies of robustly verifiable data, our relationship with government changes. And then in addition to that, if you have high levels of transparency, one of the reasons we separate private companies and government is because we don't want to intermix a lot of weird incentives. But if you could just program it and say, this money should never mix with this money, and when money goes through this, it should be transparent. When money goes here, it should be private. And all of those sorts of controls of transparency could be controlled by AI. And I don't think it's going to be LLMs. I think it's going to be structured probabilistic programs. I think then you get a very programmable, robust society. And that's kind of my dream. And I think that we will build these tools integrated with the financial system as well as the political system.
Yeah, thank you. That makes me wonder if it will lead to kind of increasingly better understanding of different preferences, or just kind of more hyper specialization and fragmentation of markets.
I think it depends on the goal. You know, I think if you're a totalitarian government where you're trying to keep privacy of those in power and eliminate privacy of those without, then you end up with one structure. And I think if you're trying to create maximum transparency of those in power and maximum privacy for those who aren't, then you end up with a very different architecture. And I think what we're seeing with AI as well as with blockchain, I think we're empowering humans who control them. And if the people who are in charge are going in one direction, it basically hurls us in the direction that we're going. And my concern is that our institutions aren't necessarily all pointed in the right direction, and that putting jetpacks on our current institutions is kind of dangerous. And so, but I think the answer is it depends. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 3 minutes left. So is there any questions? Okay, one question from.
Hi, are we seeing much scope for development of standards in terms of the data sets that the large language models are being trained on?
There's a lot of conversation around it, but I don't think there's any convergence on anything. And I think what's important to also look at is that, you know, if you imagine that these systems are going to get 1,000x more powerful, because the way that transformers and large language models work, they don't sit and think on the data. The more powerful they become, you need that much more data. And we're already scraping the bottom of the barrel. And, you know, you see like Elon getting excited because he has Twitter and now he has data that other people don't have. I think they're very hungry for data, at least the current models. I think that again, probabilistic programs and others can do more with less data, but the current LLMs, I think, require ingestion and they have a lot of power. And so I think that the efforts to have a structured conversation about annotating and managing data exist, but they're sort of falling on deaf ears because there's so much business interest. I think in Europe, you see, you know, France and others talking about regulating before we go forward. But I think the US and UK and some extent Japan, I think, are more interested in supporting the commercial and application side, which tends to not restrict. And also, I think the meta problem is that I don't think we know exactly what the uses of the data are going to be. So it's hard to come up with the structuring. But I think it's a very important point, and I think we need to have a conversation about it and try to move it forward. But I don't have a really good answer as to who I know that's doing it well.
Other comments from, okay. I think it's the last question.
Yeah, last question. Yeah, this is Mahesh. Yeah, so question for George. So in terms of you're talking about the AI getting 1,000 times and even more powerful. And when we talk about quantum computing, which is again a beast, and when these titans come together, what is the impact that we are looking at? Is there any study work, anything going on in this front?
Yeah, I'm not a quantum computing expert, so I've tracked a little bit about its impact on crypto, but I unfortunately don't have an answer on how it connects to AI.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so someone who can answer that question. It's difficult. Okay, I think it's time. Thank you very much for all panelists and your support to BGIN. And so let us conclude this discussion. Thank you very much, everyone, to join.
Thank you.